Hey, it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful, empowered harmonizers. We're zooming in and focusing in today on a great viewer question, and that is, how do you handle anger and betrayal as a result of a relationship with someone who you've discovered, indeed, who has betrayed you or has been manipulative? And you've worked so hard on the relationship, but you have such a feeling of defeat that it really sort of backfires on you in boomerangs, and you have an intense state of anger. I think this is a great viewer question because I think oftentimes people go through a series and phases of emotions that can be very debilitating and indeed crippling for long periods of time, that disrupt your thought process, most namely because of a toxic, or what becomes a toxic emotion called anger, which then, as a result of a relationship with a narcissist, it can kind of double back and sort of backfire or ricochet back to you, when indeed the source doesn't really seem to feel to come from you. In other words, it's because as a result of the relationship, it's not something that you just did on your own. It's a result of feeling sort of violated, betrayed, and really ultimately a feeling of toxic disappointment. And this toxic disappointment, as a result, meaning you've tried so hard to be a source of supply, or you didn't realize you were a source of supply, but you've tried so hard to win their affection. You've tried so hard to win their love. You've worked so hard to try to maintain their loyalty. And you've been these things to this individual. You've been loyal. You've given constant and consistent support, affection, and trust. You've allowed them to be, really sort of, you've allowed yourself to be captivated by this individual. In other words, they had or have still your commitment. When you are involved with a state of commitment with a narcissist, this ultimately is going to result in my viewpoint, sort of backfire in ricochet or boomerang back to you in intensity, when it's founded by devotion, loyalty, love, trust, wanting the best for this individual, trying to be all these things to this individual who is a narcissist, who by virtue of their design and the structure of their personality, they take names and basically just kick you to the curb if you no longer meet their supply requirements, or they found another, or because of their grandiosity, they're going to build up a whole slew of defense and attack on you because you're not sort of, going along with the crowd, playing their game, playing into their illusion that they are either the authority, the number one, the one who can't be contended with. Such is the plague of a relationship with a narcissist. Now, a narcissist is always, in their mind, going to be the winner. There are no other winners. And that means really as good as. Meaning, someone who is a narcissist, they always want to be the top shelf. They always want to be the number one on the list. They always want to be the favorite. They always want to be the best. They are extremely competitive in this regard, and not always, competitive like as in sports or business, although they oftentimes are that as well. There is a severe contention, obsession, and a compulsion for them to be this number one top shelf, status in the relationship. And people then need to be supportive of this, or support or supply, to keep this strategy of theirs and this structure of theirs and this role that they subconsciously assign to other people, which means less than, not, and then it can become a laughable thing where you then give yourself permission to honor their better than position, either consciously or subconsciously, laughing at their jokes just to be as a support, laughing at their grandiose schemes just to be support, chiming in with their entitlement just for support, or that you sort of believe in it or don't believe it in the beginning, but then you continue to carry on, and then you find that this approach or mindset does not really serve you. In fact, it can backfire. It can cause you to realize that you have allocated yourself to the stoop. You've allocated yourself to the less than. In fact, for a lot of people who find themselves very angry, they had unknowingly relegated themselves to this. In other words, or half-heartedly agreed, laughed at, said, in their heart, they'll always get away with it. So they're allocating this person and they, to that position. They're relegating them to that position, and they're hurt and angered as a result because they find that all you've given to them not only was taken for granted, but it was, it was treated as if it was worthless, unimportant, invaluable, rather unvaluable, not invaluable, when you were giving was all those things: valuable, meaningful, loyal, really what you felt you had to do in your life to keep things going. And the ricochet backfiring, meaning you didn't get not only like in return, you got shot down in return. Something they might have done to humiliate you and embarrass you. Burning bridges, scorching the earth, meaning saying things behind your back or saying things to your face, even after, and it creates this sort of a cognitive dissonance, meaning, after all I have done, I've played according to your game, your rules, and it still isn't good enough. My best is not good enough. What I've done, who I am, is not good enough then. So there's all these then parallels. And the crippling anger is indeed that. It can be a very crippling anger that you need to be able to see clarity and balance through. Anger can be very crippling, and hostility it can mount up and then be felt and interpreted by the body in that fight or flight is terms of almost a toxic self-retribution, or even self-hatred, self-loathing, self-sabotaging then. Not being able to think straight. That anger can cause a thought disruption and a thought disruption disorder. This can be very uncomfortable and unpleasant because it's not able to be thought through and sorted through and resolved. This is known as unresolved anger. In the state, it's just not even like you might see in other situations or other relationships where there's this sort of coming together or sharing of terms or mutual understanding of why things didn't work out. In other words, there's admission of guilt, or admission of apology, or admission of wrongdoing. If they could just come clean, it would make the anger oftentimes melt away. It would be, a heart-to-heart situation, and then there would be some understanding. The self-hatred, the self-retribution, the feeling of powerlessness, sort of a hostile powerlessness, would then melt away. There'd be all of a sudden this relief, meaning, okay, I'm not going crazy, or I'm not caught up in this crazy making. This is known as crazy making. There's this gaslighting experience, meaning you're you're feeling or treated one way and then you find the flip side. There's this violation of boundaries. And so it's not only the betrayal, but certain other things can create this. The violation of boundaries. If you look at in the beginning and kind of look at the evolution, that can help to relieve this anger. And the resolution, the relief and letting go is going to take time. The release of that sort of lid, the lid seems to push down more and more. The law of the lid. You feel like you've risen to the top of your ability with managing this feeling, and it can get lower and lower and lower and feel like an anger pressure cooker. It needs to be released. Can be pent up anger. It can affect you physiologically, meaning it causes, your face to constantly frown, feel that you're frowning all the time. You're not in a state of peace and neutrality. You find that you're sabotaging other relationships because of this feeling. You're sabotaging your employment. You're sabotaging your happiness. You're not able to think straight. It's because that fight or flight is now running the show. And it's a very complex, sort of convoluted, I equate it to almost like chemicals in a test tube. In other words, you don't know quite what's in there. All you know is it's bubbling over and spilling over into your life, and it don't stop. It's like, in the U.S., we have Old Faithful. It is a geyser. You can see it at Yellowstone Park, but it's like all of a sudden on almost, clockwork, they can predict when the Old Faithful is going to go. And people will come and then they'll see it, but it's really kind of like it becomes a constant geyser, but you don't know what time it's going to go off, how long it's going to go off. All you know is it's shooting up and spewing that emotion from underneath the earth or underneath the surface. You don't know how to turn it off. You don't know how to turn down the temperature. You don't know how to turn it down so it can become manageable, and you can just look at it like a trickle and let it kind of pass by. It just seems to be in the face. Like some people will say like a fire hose. It just does not, and it's in all orifices, meaning it's in your eyes, ears, taste, your heart, etc. It's really from within. So I think it's important to understand the cause that's created this effect and to realize why it's so solid, and then to break it up so you can get clarity, happiness, and move on. So if you look at the cause that's created this, it's to understand oftentimes at the root, there's a violation of boundaries where you have been made vulnerable and you have let them in. So in other words, there was in the beginning a degree of trust with this individual. It can be during the love bombing phase, even the devalue, and even the discard phase. In other words, you hold on to the relationship even though it's gone south, sideways, sour, in the pooper, in the circular file, gone to the wind, whatever it is. Even though it's a shambles, people are still trying to work to repair it. And they stay on too long, oftentimes because of the cognitive dissonance. You need to sort through that cognitive dissonance, meaning you're feeling so many things that are, in opposite directions. In other words, happiness and sorrow, devotion and regret, devotion and disgust, desire and rejection, wanting yet wanting to abandon. So there's this cognitive dissonance, and the narcissist will play on those, and oftentimes they will continue, to do that. So to understand to get the control and get reins on it, let's look at the cause that's created the effect and how this began. So especially if you go back into the love bombing phase, there's generally that vulnerability where you open up and you're defenseless, meaning vulnerable, meaning you've let down your guard, you've let down your defenses, you've let them in. You've let them into your sacred space, your heart, your gut, your intuition, your mind, into your very being, the very core of you. You've let them in there. There does exist this place. The core of your being, your heart, your center, your who you are. You've let them into and allowed them to help shape and define who you are, your I am. So there's this feeling of enmeshment or love, okay, love and oftentimes unconditional, where you have extended an unconditional positive regard to this person, meaning even though they've done some things, you've still gone along with it. Ha ha, isn't it funny? Whatever. Or you've just put up and shut up. You just got really quiet when they did these things, and you thought 1, 2, 3, okay, I'm the one who has to change to keep this trophy relationship or whatever this relationship is, the pedestal that it's on, maybe this person is at your workplace or your family or your spouse. So you've got that commitment situation going on that keeps the gaslighting and the cognitive dissonance in place. So you have to look at that core commitment that you have made and understand how you've let them in. But even furthermore, so you can understand where your control and your empowerment is. And to also take responsibility and accountability for when it got carried away or went on too long and you continued to walk the walk, talk the talk, play the game, play the illusion, or get really quiet and keep yourself in a relationship of just what we're going to call emotionally abusive or manipulative, or what is not in your best interest, which becomes crippling. So if you look once again for some examples of how this can originally be, how could this even come to be, peace and harmony? How could I have gotten myself into this situation? Furthermore, how do I get out of these feelings? Well, it's important to take ownership and actually kind of reflect back and look back at your relationship with the narcissist and actually own some of the events, meaning go back and get on your feet, get in your focus, and sort of use the role of metacognition, meaning your ability to think about what you're thinking about. In other words, to reflect back, to see what happened and dissect it and pull it apart. What did the narcissist do? How did they violate your boundaries? And how did you allow, permit, based on trust, based on unconditional love? In other words, you're coming from this pure space of love, devotion, unconditional, positive regard, all these wonderful things. Here's this, wonderful person. Here's this amazing person who came into your life, a godsend, etc. All the, names that you gave them in positive, okay? And then what did they do to take advantage of that innocence? What did they do to take advantage of that lack of knowledge? What did they do to take advantage of that purity? What did they take advantage of as someone who is manipulative, where you are not, where they're a game player and you are not a player, where they were utilizing either their felicity of knowledge or felicity of tongue or their means, whatever their means were? How did they violate and transgress that boundary where all of a sudden what you have is no longer your own? It's no longer your bedroom. It's no longer your kitchen. It's no longer your book. It's no longer your car. It's no longer your place. It's no longer your I am. How did they come in and take ownership of you or your stuff or your place or your office or your desk or your computer or your phone or your clothing or your shoes? How did they, or your plans, how did they take ownership? And you, based on that trust, had, unknowingly either allowed or permitted the allowance of this out of love. So generally it's coming from a place of trust. So you had extended to them this very important aspect of trust and furthermore commitment. And trust meaning you trusted them. You felt that you would entrust your safety, your secrets, your passions, your quiet moments, who you really are, your emotions, your weakness. You had entrusted some very special, original, and true aspect of yourself, especially that of, trusting the more fragile aspect of yourself. It could even be your insecurities, or, you had trusted them to be supportive, or you had trusted them to be there. So you've got this, a degree of trust, and then where that was then violated or betrayed. Violation of boundaries, meaning, did they come in and own your bedroom? Did they come in and own your kitchen? Did they come in and own another relationship if you're married? Did they act as if someone else is their spouse and they're number one? It could even be displaced onto a child. And it's very confusing. You've got all these different emotions mixed up. It's like a chemistry experiment once again in a beaker. If you remember back in the day when you're in science class, and then all of a sudden, you're putting in all these chemicals, and then there's this reaction. So it's like a chemistry beaker of all these different components that's just rolling over. It's just not one thing. It's very layered. It's very complex. So it's important to understand and dissect all those layers, which are oftentimes very solid and almost like a wall. So you have to be able to break that down and get to the beauty of it. But furthermore, understand precisely where and what happened, and understand why you would let them in, and to see why they violated the boundaries, and then the effect. Did they come in and just, use your phone way too many times so that you no longer feel like you own it? Do they use your computer, take your car, ignore you? The covert narcissist, just straight up ignoring you when you need affection, when you need communication, when you need a companion, when you need camaraderie, when you need togetherness, you need cohesiveness. It can be with a sibling. You got to be on the same page. It can be someone at work. Where you need. It's not want. Oh, wouldn't it be nice if? It's a requirement. It is a must. It is a mandatory. And so in the beginning, your must all of a sudden becomes non-existent. We must have respect. We must have trust. We must have open communication, and we must not do A, B, C, or X, Y, Z. It's just, it can't simultaneously exist. This becomes cognitive dissonance, and the two don't flow. It becomes a tension. It's like oil and vinegar. It's like oil and water. You can have water and you can pour in the oil. The oil will pool up. It'll be there. It doesn't easily disperse. It becomes, and this is just my analogy for it, feeling stuck. And you lose your vision. You lose your hope. You lose your dreams. You lose your I am. This is experienced as anger, and really what becomes self-reproach or self-loathing. I mean, even that anger, that self-loathing, and then a desire to try to reclaim that. And the mistake then is the mistake is then to think that the source of control is outside of you in this person, when you need to see for yourself how the violation needs to be shored up within. But it's important to understand all the ingredients that you put into that beaker to see why it keeps going off. So you can get, be able to turn it down, pipe it down, and then move through, and it's no longer in front of you like a big bottleneck, of glass, glasses, they used to call them back in the day, you know, the bottleneck, or the bottom of the bottle of glass is really thick. You can't even see your future. That is because you're so stuck in that fight or flight in those two areas, the limbic center and then that prefrontal cortex can't simultaneously work together. And that's that cognitive dissonance. You're in that fight or flight, that tension. Your body is armoring up. Your face muscles then armor up. You experience scoliosis. You're constantly contorting and twisting, or you're constantly gripping all the time. You're breaking your teeth because, these are some of the symptoms. You're grinding your teeth. You've got a constant backache, constant neck ache, migraine headaches. Your immune system is gone out the shooter, And so begin to go back and be able to own those events where you were being violated and didn't really speak up, say anything, allow it to register, and be able to say, no, I ain't going there. No, that's violating trust. No, that's violating my respect. And that's corrupting me and corroding me from the inside. So that is known as toxic anger, when it gets to that really full, permeated, and saturated area. And this is a great viewer question. It is this anger of betrayal, either where you've been shut out, or you've been locked into the lower stoop. You're locked. People feel either locked into the lower stoop, or they feel shut out from being able to cycle through. It becomes a block, a constant anger, and this can then break you down into adrenal fatigue, depression, all that. So what were some of the initial events that caused this? How did they own you? Did they just barge into your house, take your food? Did they just barge into your office and start flipping through things like it's just garbage? Did they just, take your car without taking you? Did they take over your house and ignore you? These are boundary violations. It becomes then trust violations. And if you don't have that trust, you don't have anything. You're walking on pins and needles. This is anger, and then it ricochets and doubles back to you because the narcissist isn't going to work through these situations with you. They will not take ownership. They will not take responsibility. They will not apologize. They will not admit to their wrongs. They will not see that they will have a problem. They will go on their merry way and continue that obsession or that insatiable need to control and have power over others. It's a very uncomfortable position. So you have to look at and own and get back to your goodness and see where you were coming from before the violation, where you had that degree of wholeness. Wholeness meaning you were individual, you were your own person, your I am was perhaps clean or pristine. You were feeling okay. In fact, you could have been skipping to my loo and happy and loving your future with this person. So that creates kind of like this crystalline vision of how you wanted things to go. So there's this, relationships, people kind of have a vision, a crystalline vision of where it's going to go. They have an idea, they have an ideal. They kind of put that out there that they're always working towards and they're subconsciously looking to. That's known as intention, having a dream, having a goal, having a standard. And so that is out there. Get back to that original, and get back to where you're dreaming again, where you had the dream of where the relationship was going to be, how it was going to go. Begin to release some of that anxiety. You can feel maybe a lot of the anxiety and the anxiousness still there. Allow it to calm down here. It's okay to get clear. Let's just breathe through, take a deep breath, and look back to where that was. And I see that we're going to have to wrap up here in a moment, but get into that that clear, pure state where you were sort of dreaming and at the blueprint of how it was going to go, your standard, your ideal, and then how you were going to behave, and then how did you kind of refer to this individual? What was your place in their heart? How did you let down and become defenseless and, incorporate them into your I am? So you became fused, and you weren't, though, although you allowed yourself kind of to become unwhole, to have a bite taken out of you, then another bite and another bite, to the point where all of a sudden you feel like you're, the bitten apple and all you have is a rotten core. That is because someone has taken, and you were not in a position of ownership and being able to declare your boundaries and say, wait a second, you didn't have that self-respect, the security, the self-esteem, the valuation of self. Where was your value of yourself falling short? Pump it right back up right away. Become full. Have fullness of being right now. Have fullness of heart. Have fullness of integrity. Fullness of your I am. I am strong. I am lovable. I am love. In divine order, so my love will blossom. In divine order and protection, my love and my I am will blossom. And so it is. And it is a beautiful thing to be able to open up in fullness and wholeness and individuality. We're gonna circle back up on this, but I think that it's so important to understand these two situations to really move through the anger and let it go and see why. Allow it to settle down. It's your buddy, Peace and Harmony, here today. I hope these videos do help. Please share. Please subscribe for more great tools, videos, discussion, and support. Peace out. Have a beautiful day.